Hi, I'm Jeanne Fiorini. Thanks for joining the Tarot Tips. As I indicated last time, today we're going to talk about this notion of the opposites. It's a primary tenet of the tarot system, this idea that the world is held, as we perceive it, is held together by this dichotomy, the system of opposing forces, these two separate ways of experiencing the world, and either a tarot card is either strongly on one side of this dichotomy or the other, or is an attempt at reunifying these opposing forces. This idea I've covered pretty thoroughly in the free introduction that's available on my website, the Introduction to the Major Arcana. It's a 15 or 20-minute video tarot class, which will overview this and a few other of the basic principles of the Major Arcana. So check it out. It's free. If you haven't already taken advantage of that, feel free to email me and get the information there. For the purpose of what we're going to talk about today, I want to go through this idea about the opposites and how it shows up in the tarot system. Similar to that idea that we talked about last time with color, that once you become aware of its importance and that it's there on the card for a reason, and that it's trying to tap us into certain non-physical energies or certain powers, if you will. This idea of the opposites works one step beyond that and takes this notion of images that depict one side or the other of the dichotomy. And once you see them in a tarot card, you're going to recognize them as pieces of this polarity, part of this system that both creates the world, creates our perception of the world, and part of our job as conscious human beings is trying to figure out how to work with these opposing forces and also try to find the balance between them, both in our external world and in ourselves. So you've got 78 tarot cards out in front of you. I am going to again use my little cheat sheet because there's several little things there and I don't want to forget because they're all important. How do the opposites show up in the tarot deck? The very first and really obvious one, I think, is this male and female idea. Now, I'm going to try to use my right-hand side to talk about the things that are on the dynamic principle, and my left-hand side to talk about things that are on the receptive principle. So you've got the male and the female figures in the tarot. Very rarely does this really mean a specific man and a specific woman. More likely what it means is here's a dynamic energy and or here's a receptive energy. And if you remember the part about that we talked about when we on the last tip when we were talking about colors, don't assume that one is bad and one is good. It's just a question of they hold their power differently. This is a notion about the opposites that's really essential to remember. There isn't a good and a bad here. There's a how do I express this power and how do I express this power? They're going to maybe have opposing methods, but they're not opposing necessarily in their value judgment. So you've got the male, you've got the female. The male is the dynamic, the female is the receptive. We've also got, in terms of just basic color code cues, we've got the male being, or let's say the white and the black. The white is one side of the polarity, the black is the other. The black is the place of receptive potential. Okay, the white is the attainment and the transcendence of the physicality. Kind of to take that idea one step farther with kind of this male-female notion, we have the water, which is blue, and the fire, which is red. So you've got two different opposites there. You've got the fire and the water, and you've got the red and the blue. These are opposing forces, ways that the opposites show up in the tarot. We've already discussed this receptive dynamic idea. That's very much something that underlies the whole tarot system. Think about, this one's a little bit more subtle. Linear versus, I don't want to say versus, linear and circular. That's the difference between this and this. Okay? It's a very different energy, the linear and the circular. You could also take the notion of the horizontal, I have to do it with this hand, the horizontal line is receptive and has to do with the physical plane. The vertical line is dynamic, and sometimes this is thought of as the spiritual coming into the physical. So any intersection of two lines like this is an image of wholeness, indicating spiritual energy coming into physical form. So there we see a unification of those opposites in that kind of cross image or symbol. Another very obvious, once you start to look for it, metaphor in the tarot between the opposites is the solar and the lunar. The solar is the fiery, dynamic. The lunar is the receptive, watery principle. Now, if you think of some tarot cards, some have obvious lunar and solar images in them. Think of the Two of Swords that has the moon, the crescent moon in the background, indicating the need for receptivity. There are a few cards where you might get something that looks both like a sun and a moon together, and the image that comes to mind there is the Eight of Cups, where the person is walking away, and that thing in the sky looks sort of like a sun and sort of like a moon, maybe even an eclipse sort of thing. That too, eclipse is an image of conjunction or reunification of those opposites. How can something be solar and lunar at the same time? So it has like that pro and the con, the black and the white, again, all that interplay between the opposites. I've been doing it throughout this video, but the right hand is, or the right side is thought of as the active dynamic side, the left hand as the more receptive side. I think that may be why the tradition is that to cut, or when you're working with your tarot cards, to draw with your left hand, or to cut your cards with your left hand, partly because it's the hand or the arm that's most connected to your heart chakra, but also that's where your intuition lies, more on the left hand side. And that's going to be the last opposite that I'm going to talk about today, is that if we think of the left hand side as being about intuition, and the right hand side being about logic and decisiveness, we could say that logic leads to decisiveness, leads to decision making, leads to conclusions, and that the left side of ourselves is more about processing things, allowing things to take their time, dealing with things intuitively. And I think you can see how in the ideal world, I'm going to go back to the blending of the two, that it's our job as conscious human beings to try to figure out, when do I need to be decisive, and then when do I need to be respectful of process? Where do I need to be clear in how I think about something, and where do I need to stand back and observe? That this finding the integration and the balance between the opposites is, you can't have tarot without it, and you really can't have I'll say a balanced life without that either. So keep your eyes open for how the opposites play together, fight with each other, compel each other toward growth as you're working with your tarot cards. Thanks very much. I'll see you next time.